My background, I graduated college. I did the normal college life. I lived in a fraternity house. My first 2 years were horrible, just being honest, right? I'm not going to lie. And so I had a master's my first 2 years in Miller Lite and Busch Light. Yeah, it was brutal. My junior year, I moved up, and I was like, all right, I kind of got to focus on getting my grades right. Okay. And long story short, man, I got into my major, and I really liked it. I was an organizational communication major, and I minored in business. And I'm like, how am I going to make money? I wasn't going to law school. I wasn't going to med school, but I knew I wanted to sell. And even at that point, I'm like, I knew guys in the car industry that crushed it. We had guys in my fraternity house. This is a crazy story, but a bunch of guys went to work at CarMax their senior year, and these guys are paying off their credit card debt. They're buying tabs at the bars for people, and I'm like, okay, if I tell my parents I went to school for 4 years and I'm going to go sell cars, they're going to be like, I didn't even want to go down that road. So long story short, I went to a real estate investment company for like 6 months, got recruited in the dream job that everyone thought they wanted as a pharmaceutical sales rep. Oh, yeah. That was like everyone said, oh, this is the best job you can ever have. So I got picked up by Janssen Pharmaceutical, which is actually a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson.
Okay.
Worked there for like 2.5 years, did very well, got recruited by a young biotech company called Cephalon. Back then, I was calling on pain management doctors primarily, and I was selling a product called Actic, which was a fentanyl lozenge, calling on all different doctors all over Orlando, Central Florida area, and I liked it, but I didn't love it.
Okay.
And I just didn't have the passion behind it. Medicine just wasn't me at the time. So fast forward 3 years, I'm sitting at home, and I'm getting ready for work. And, back then, pharmaceutical reps, you had to wear the coat, the tie, you had to dress up, everything. And my buddy calls me, and he's like, hey, man, I don't know if you know this, but we're launching this drug. And I said, well, of course I know about it. It was on our weekly emails nonstop. He goes, they just passed and got their second or third letter of FDA approval. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like,
what drug is this?
Provigil.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
before we continue, I know what Provigil is. Can you just give a audience a brief overview of how awesome Provigil is?
So Provigil was launched. They were coming out with Nuvigil, which was basically just one molecular strand off. But Provigil, if you can imagine drinking the best cup of coffee with no jitters. It doesn't work on the nucleus accumbens. It doesn't affect your sleep cycle. It's probably one of the best products ever made.
Now,
right?
Rumor has it that remember that movie Limitless?
Yes.
That Limitless was actually based off of Provigil, and that drug, they used to call it, I believe, like the drug for billionaires, because at the time, before the patent whole thing, now correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I remember right from my days of getting this stuff on the black market, that this drug was like so hard to get. I believe even maybe it was narcolepsy was originally made
That's originally
right?
what it was made for, was narcolepsy, and then they got an indication for shift work sleep disorder.
Got it. Oh,
and
nice.
So,
well done there.
Yeah, and so that's how that product really took off. So Provigil was out. I was on a different sales force. I was on the pain care side. That was the Provigil side.
Okay.
Provigil was coming off patent, and so they were getting this new version of it called Nuvigil.
Yep. Okay, I remember that. Okay.
So my buddy's like, hey, man, these stock options are worth a ton of money. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I hung up the phone with him, didn't think anything about it. Like a week goes by, and one of my best friends from high school is my financial planner. And he calls me. He's like, hey, have you looked at what these things are worth? And I'm like, no, but you're like the second call I've had. And he's like, you've been saying that your heart's not in this and you wanted to find a way to get back to real estate. Like, maybe this is it. So I'm like, how much money are we talking? Well, it was enough that I was like, okay, I woke up and I was like, you know what? So my wife was pregnant with our oldest son. I have two boys, 18 and 16.
I don't want to stop you. Well into the six figures here?
Six figures,
okay,
right?
Okay.
Yeah, six figures. Yeah. Enough to where I could say, and I had vacation time. I had just won a contest, right? So in the six figures.
Good.
So I tell my wife, mind you, she's pregnant with our oldest son. And I said, babe, I need you to hear me out. I'm quitting my job. And she's like, you're what? I'm about to give birth. Fast forward, cashed in the stock options, cashed in the vacation time. They owed me a bonus. Said, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I'm out. So then I go back to real estate. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, right, how now I've left something I've been doing for 7 years. how am I going to go back into real estate? But I was a wholesaler, so we were house flipping. I would get houses under contract, and we were assigning the contracts.
When is this now? When are you talking about?
So my son this is 2005.
Okay, tough market 2005 for house flipping and stuff.
Tough market.
Because I got into like 2009 buying up. This is when, after the crash, I got through a little period of time where we were buying titles off of HOAs.
Yeah.
Remember, you could buy the title off the HOA until the bank went ahead and did something on the foreclosure side?
100%. You could get a lien on it.
I loved it. Yeah, exactly what you do.
Yep.
Anyways, okay, so 2005.
So 2005, I'm like, how am I going to do this? Well, the guys that I originally worked with out of college had kind of figured it out. So they had an office in Orlando. They had an office in St. Pete. I know I'm going way off here.
That's fine. Come here.
So anyway, I end up starting, and 6 months into it, I've got my own office in Winter Haven in Polk County.
Got it.
Crush it. Real estate market takes a dump, 2008, 9, 10, which turned out to be a blessing for guys like me because all these foreclosures were coming available.
They're everywhere.
And it just turned into a smorgasbord. And we crushed it till 2016.
Yeah, then it starts to dry up.
It started to dry up.
Yeah, I remember this. So who are you buying the foreclosures off of? You buying them off the bank? You're buying them off the HOAs? You're buying off people?
All the above.
Hey,
we were sitting out the mailers like, oh, your house has potential liens coming. Call us. We'll clear the liens. We'll buy them. Distressed properties. Like we were like the buy the dumpiest properties.
I love it.
And flip them. That's all we were doing. Selling paper. We would keep some, fix them up, and renovate them. I had some rental houses that I kept. And then so long story short, 2016 comes. My cousin was one of my business partners. He's like, hey, man, the market's drying up less and less. Why don't we come out with a deal where you can kind of go in another direction? And I was like, you know what? Totally cool. I was the best man in his wedding. He's my cousin. He's my mom's brother's son. No big deal. End up moving on. A buddy of mine who was one of my fraternity brothers goes and opens up a medical lab. And he's like, hey, every doctor in town from, when you crushed it back in the day, why don't you become a distributor? So I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Ended up, he owned a medical lab. They did toxicology testing. I was a distributor, had 5 or 6 sales reps working for me, had a good run. 2017, something like that, he gets an idea where that was like 2012. He starts the distributorship. I'm still doing real estate, but that's when my cousin had the idea. And it took a couple years for us to work out the kinks for my cousin to give me a proposal to get me out. Mm-hmm. Finally got out. We live out in the Lake Nona area. We ended up buying a home health care company. Never done home health care. Buy it, open one, buy another one, get it open, have a drop site, sell that. So there's a point to all this. Never did it before, but had to figure out how to sell it. COVID comes along. He starts another lab. I'm actually a partner in this lab in 2019 after we sold home health care.
Okay.
We're just doing toxicology testing. Doing good, growing the company, slow and steady wins the race. We're in the panhandle of 2020, March. The whole town shuts down. Mm-hmm. And we're like, okay, this COVID thing is real.
Yeah. So
we come back to Orlando, and none of our reps can get in to see doctors. I mean, you go, you're doing toxicology testing. You're trying to see addiction treatment rehab centers. You're trying to call on pain management psychiatrists who write benzodiazepines, everything like that.
Right.
Everything's done on Zoom. So it was scary. By the grace of God, 2 months later, we were able to get our hands on a COVID machine. But it was very risky because at this time, remember, we didn't know much about COVID. We knew what we saw on the TV,
sure,
but we didn't know much about it. I definitely didn't know much about it, right? So we ended up getting this COVID machine, and within like 60 days, I mean, we were just cranking.
What is a COVID machine, like testing? Like in other
COVID
words,
testing.
Somebody would do a swab or something like that, and they would use your machine?
Yeah.
Could they rent it or something? Like,
no,
how does that work?
So we had sales reps going to all the assisted living facilities and the doctor's offices. And think about it, like when you would go into an urgent care, they would swab you, but they would send it out. They would send it to us, and overnight we would process the results.
And you're charging them every single one of those?
Every single one of them. So fast forward 6-7 months, we're in a bigger lab. We've got machines everywhere, full staff, and it's awesome. Runs great, still runs great. My dad got cancer numerous times, but in 2020, end of 2022, my dad passed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I didn't have a relationship with my dad for like 32 years of my life. And when I say it affected me like nothing I've ever had. I finally get this relationship with him for the last, I'm 47 now, passed when I was 45. So the last 12, 13 years, we get a relationship. And losing him, it just, my mom hasn't been doing well health-wise, my grandparents. And then when you're dealing with all these patients and running all these tests and you got sales reps calling you and doctors calling you, all I could think about was my dad. So one day, my business partner's like, man, I don't like seeing you like this. He's like, if you ever, want to get out, let's come up with a plan. And I just knew that was it. Now, at this point, when I say I had no clue what I was going to do, brother, I had no clue what I was going to do. My uncle, who has always been like one of my closest friends and is like my mentor, had started a roofing company about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And he's always the guy I go to for advice, right? And him, my wife, pray about it and everything. And so we were talking, and I said, hey, I think I'm gonna move on. I think I'm gonna take some time off. Again, at that time, my son was a senior in high school, junior, senior. My youngest son, 2 years behind him. I'm gonna just relax for a little bit. I wasn't stupid with my money, and I'm just gonna get my kids to college. I'm going to see colleges, campuses with them, and just focus on them. Because, again, I'm upset. I've got a spot missing in my heart because of all the years I lost my dad. So we talk about it, no problem. So then one day, out of the blue, he's like, well, if you want to make some mailbox money, he's like, all these people in town. He's like, you don't have to go on a roof. You don't have to go buy a pair of cougar paws. You don't have to go get a telescopic ladder and do all this stuff. He's like, I just want you to call a couple people. And it was a small commission, right? He's like, I'll have you fill out some paperwork. I didn't even know what I was filling out. He's like, I'll have you fill out some paperwork. And if you send me these leads, and if my guy closes them, I'm just going to send you a check. I was like, all right. So I signed up with him. And the first week, I sold a roof, literally. And I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. So then I didn't do it for like 2 weeks. My wife and I were going out to dinners and lunches. I was hanging out with my kids and everything. They played travel lacrosse. So I'd kind of forgotten about it, but the roof got done, and he called me. He's like, hey, I have a check for you. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, all right, right on. So I go down to his shop and get a check. So I come home, and we didn't really have anything planned. So I'm like, I'll make a few more phone calls. I mean, what's it going to hurt? And so I started calling some real estate people that I knew. And then I started calling some people that I knew for some other networking meetings that I'd gone to. I think my third month, I think I told you I sold like 7 roofs. And my business partner now was like, we got something, right?